This is Simon Rosenberg from Hopium Chronicles. Really grateful that everyone is with us today. We've got about a 30-minute presentation. I'm not going to be taking questions during the course of the presentation. There'll be plenty of time for discussion at the end, and I'll actually extend it a little bit today because we started a little bit late. But let's get going. And so this presentation is called "With Democrats, Things Get Better." I joke that it's the most important and least understood story in American politics today, particularly given what's happening at the White House today between Kevin McCarthy and the president. Let me just advance. So first of all, welcome to my new home, my new political home. After 27 years, I've left and shuttered NDN, the organization I was running. I'm now here at a Substack called Hopium Chronicles. Please come by if you like this work, subscribe, it's free. You can also become a paid member if you want, but it's where this kind of, all the work that you're gonna see today, all the analysis of all now lives there at Hopium Chronicles. And Dudeline, if you can just text me and just tell me that this is all going well, that would be helpful. So this deck, I've been doing this deck in some version since 2017. I originally built it in response to Trump's carnage speech that he gave in January 20th on his inaugural day, which painted a picture of America that I felt was inaccurate and was talking us down too much. And so I tried to really respond with a look at how America was doing much better than Trump had represented. And this issue about whether or not America's been in decline and failing is central to the MAGA project. And this deck is an attempt to sort of right the record a little bit and tell a very different story than the MAGA story of America. And so it was originally called Patriotism and Optimism, Rejecting Trump's Poisonous Pessimism. And it's matured over the time. And I do it every month, once a month. It allows me to wrestle with this data. It allows you all, if you're interested, to see this stuff new and fresh each month. And so from the very first day, this was about telling a more positive story about the country, about the Democratic Party, the American project, and rejecting this negative sentiment machine that MAGA and the Republicans have become. Our story today begins in 1989. It's when the Cold War ended and a new era began, a new era of globalization. Things really changed here and around the world. I mean, this is just a list of the kinds of things that we've seen since 1989. But we live in a very different world today than we did. The most important piece of it, and it's very relevant for all of our discussions, is the rise of globalization, right? How America tried after 1989 to push the world or make our system available to all the people of the world. That's been the sort of central American project since 1989. And it's gone relatively well, as we'll talk about at the end. But we've seen enormous changes in the world during this period. And so one of the questions, as I think about American politics, the way that I try to think about all this is, how did the two parties do managing against all that change? How has the Republican and the Democratic Party done, given that the world has changed so much since 1989? We lived in a Cold War era, and now we entered this new era. How have the two parties done managing against change? And however you look at the data, what we're going to see today is that one party has managed well and modernized and produced a politics that has been successful, and another party hasn't. And let's look at just the basic job creation numbers, which are so central to the current economic conversation. Is that, this is the jobs created per presidency since 1989. You can see under Democrats, lots of jobs, under Republicans, not so much. And you can see that under Trump, he was the first president since Herbert Hoover to have had net job loss on his watch. And then another way of cutting the data, and this is when I began this presentation in 2017, I started with this fundamental slide, is that under Obama, in the 16 years of Clinton and Obama, almost 34 million jobs were created. In the 16 years of Bush's and Trump, apples and apples, right? There were 2 million jobs created. So 17 times as many jobs were created under these 16 years of these two presidencies before Biden, under Democrats and under Republicans. And then Biden's come along, and we've seen him 6 times as many jobs have been created in Biden's first 2 years as was created in the 16 years of the 2 Bushes and Trumps. And when you break it down by month, is another cut on this. And we were using this because up until recently, Biden hadn't had, 2 years under his belt. He just had months. Is that you can see how stark this is. The job creation numbers we got on Friday, which showed that 253,000 jobs were created, would be the equivalent of 2 years of Republican job creation. I mean, this is how out of whack the current economic discussion is in Washington, which is that the Republicans only saw 10,000 jobs a month created over 16 years. And last month, which the Republicans are describing as anemic and terrible job growth, we saw 250,000 jobs created. That's as much as would have been created in more than 2 years of their presidencies. So again, another sign of the economy doing well. This is the unemployment rate under these 6 presidencies, right? It's gone up under Republicans, it's gone down substantially under Democrats again and again and again. And then when you add it all up, there have been 49 million jobs created in America since 1989. 47 million of those, 96%, basically all of them, have been created under Democratic presidents. It's really an extraordinary track record for us. GDP growth tells the same story, where we've seen even under Biden, right, GDP growth is 3 times what it was under Trump. And then let's talk about what's happened with the stock market, because it is a much bigger story, I think, than people really understand. When the world opened up in the 80s and 90s, and then in the early part of the 21st century, American companies were very well positioned to take advantage of a world that had gone from 1.5 billion, 2 billion customers to 7 billion. And our companies have been wildly successful now in taking advantage of globalization. And we've seen the Dow soar. Our stock markets have soared. The Dow in 1989 was 2,000. It's 33,000 or so. Today, it's gone up almost 17-fold. And so this is a good thing, right? We are far wealthier today in the United States. Our companies have been wildly successful across industry, all across industry. We were better able to take advantage of these opportunities than many other countries. And that we also see that the stock wealth that's been created has happened almost entirely under Democratic presidents. And you see this galloping gains in the stock market under Clinton and Obama. Biden's got some work to do, right, to catch up here a little bit, but it'll come. He's got time. And so this wealth that's been created, this unprecedented wealth that's been created, and this enormous success story. I mean, The Economist just had this whole cover story about how successful the American economy's been since 1989. We are much wealthier today as a country. But of course, as Democrats, we are concerned about the distribution of that wealth, right? Not just the aggregate wealth. And the good news here is that families have moved ahead since 1989, not at 16-fold, not at 5-fold, not at 10-fold, but every type of family, Black, Hispanic, Asian, white, are wealthier today or making more money today than they were in 1989. It's not as much as we need, and we can't be satisfied with this data. But it's certainly, in terms of median household income, we've seen slow, steady progress. Things got much better, though, of course, under Democrats. And you hear often commentators say that median income was flat, or on a straight line, and this isn't a flat line. And when we talk about median income being flat, or these lines being flat, we're taking away the credit that we deserve for having when we've been in power to see these things go up, right? And you can see the blue is Clinton and Obama. Wages and incomes have gone up far less under Republicans than they have under us, right? And then on the issue of the day, the fiscal issues of the day, this is a very clear story, and it is kind of unbelievable how much there is red wavy mythology around the fiscal matters in the United States. The last 3 Republican presidents have seen very, very large increases in the deficit under their watch. Under Trump, we had some of the most significant wages, the most significant incomes, the most significant deficit increase in modern American history. And under Clinton, we not only saw the deficit come way down, we actually got to surplus. Obama also took the deficit way down, and then it's come way down under Biden. And by the way, I will get to questions at the end. If you guys can all hold your questions, we'll get through everything. And so this story about the Republicans, I want to be clear that the Republicans voted against all of these budgets, these three budgets that created these lower deficits. Sorry, this thing's been bouncy on me, sorry. Hold on. So if you see these three deficit reductions, the Democrats who brought the deficit down, right? Republicans voted against those budgets. So they not only created higher deficits during their presidencies, they actually voted against and worked against policies that lowered the deficit. And that's been true under Biden, right? The Republicans have vehemently opposed his budgets, which have brought the deficit way down. And we really are in a place where, so much of the discussion, around the deficit is so crazy and red wavy, as I call it, right? And let's look at the next slide. I'm sorry, got a little bouncy on me. This is the percentage of the deficit as a GDP number, and as percentage of GDP going back to World War II and even before World War II. You saw World War II during a war, right? That we spent a lot of money to win the war. And then it stayed in a relatively stable place up until Reagan, when it started dropping because the supply side economics. Clinton got us up to surplus, right? Democratic president got us to surplus. And if Bush had let Clinton's tax budget stay, we would have eliminated the entire national debt, about 15 years ago. But Bush changed that. Republican economic policies again created a large deficit. You saw then it happened again, right? And Trump got us to a place. I just want you to see the Trump number here on the right of how out of whack it is with everything that's happened since World War II. I mean, the most fiscally profligate president in modern American history has been Donald Trump. And again, the deficit went up every year under Trump, and it's come down every year under Biden. I mean, the Republicans have no interest in deficit reduction. They have an interest, what they're doing today, and it's in my Twitter feed and the writings of my last few days on Hopium, they're trying to destroy the economy to take Biden down. And as the Economist said it, is that if we were to implement either the budget that they propose, the cuts they propose, it would devastate the American economy, tank global markets, or if we defaulted, it would tank the American economy and devastate global markets. So either of the alternatives the Republicans are offering would be devastating for the American economy. And here we are once again, the Republicans who brought us three consecutive recessions, three presidents, three recessions, three presidents, spiraling deficits. They're pushing us towards to recession again. And the debt ceiling, of course, has been raised more under Republican presidents than under Democratic presidents. This whole argument is just so, on the face of it, ridiculous. And remember what we've been hearing from the Republicans, right? They've been talking about all the spending Biden's doing on the war. They said we should be spending that money here at home. And then we, of course, passed these three incredibly big public investment bills in 2021 and 2022. And the Republican response to that is we have to cut them all, right? So, I mean, the illogic of their arguments are things that we have to take on. And this presentation is here in part to give you more ammunition to take on the absurdity of the Republican economic narrative. And so let's spend a little bit of time now on the Biden presidency and talk about what Joe Biden's done. So first of all, the recovery of the American economy after COVID has been stronger than any other developed economy in the world. There's lots of data on this, but we've done better than anyone else. So A+ for Joe Biden here. Number two is that we have the lowest peacetime unemployment at 3.4% since World War II. The only two times we've been lower than this have been during the Vietnam and the Korean War. So in a time of peace, this is the lowest unemployment rate since World War II. It's the lowest unemployment rate in over 50 years. A majority of Americans have never lived in an America with an unemployment rate as low as it is today. Remarkable achievement. On the uninsured, right, we have the lowest uninsured rate ever recorded right now. We just recently had the lowest poverty rate ever recorded under Joe Biden. We've seen new business starts continue to be at very elevated levels. This is an incredible sign of the health and vitality of the American economy. We've also seen wages continue to be very high, at very elevated levels, and real earnings, not real wages, but real earnings were actually positive in 2022, outpaced inflation. And the inflation story has been missing a major part of the story, which is that people have, things cost more, but people are also making much more money than they were making a year ago or 2 years ago. And that's pretty universal, by the way. We also know, because of this, the programs that we put into place in 2021, a person at the bottom 50% has more cash at hand in their bank, the way that they keep their cash, than at any time in a long time, and that people's balance sheets at the low end are actually in pretty good shape. We've seen the largest wage gains happen with people at the bottom, right? It's been very encouraging. We also know that there's almost 2 jobs now open for every unemployed person in America. It may be the lowest ever recorded. And what that means is that we need more immigrants. We don't need more child labor, right? This is really important. We are in a worker shortage in many parts of the country. More than 24 states are seeing their lowest unemployment rate ever in their history. We need more workers in America. The trade deficit has come way down, right, in recent years, something that's very important to Donald Trump and MAGA. And we also know that for all the discussion around crime rates in America are a fraction of what they were a generation ago. This is an incredible achievement by the United States. We've pushed crime rates much lower. There was a bump during COVID in some places. It's not to be unexpected given the dislocation that took place during COVID. The crime rates are settling back down to where they were before. I mean, the obvious place where where things are increasing is having to do with anything to do with gun violence, right, is on the upswing. And we know that, as ridiculous as the Republican arguments are, that the murder rates in Trump states are much higher than in blue states. And so again, all of these arguments around crime you're hearing from the Republicans are, on their face of it, absurd and not based in data. They're based in emotion and racial fear. And we also know that one of their big arguments that they make, and it's very central to the plan that the McCarthy's bringing to the White House today, they literally say every day that Joe Biden has waged a war on energy, that he's killing the American domestic ability that we used to be. Donald Trump says every day, we used to be energy independent in America until Joe Biden came along. And just let's use their metric, right, which is what's happening in the oil and gas industry. We're going to hit an all-time record of oil production this year. And we also know that oil and gas profits are at an all-time high. If Joe Biden's waging a war against American energy, he's doing a pretty poor job, actually, of it, because things are better today for the oil and gas industry than they've ever been. And all the whining that we're hearing is just unbelievable from Republicans on this. We also know that up until very recently, the number of undocumented immigrants in the country had come down. It came down under Obama and Clinton Obama and Biden when they were in the White House, and that there were fewer undocumented immigrants after they left office than when they came to office. So this idea that there was open borders was always ridiculous. But today we're facing a very different set of circumstances that we've ever faced before on the border. The president is this week releasing a new plan that I'm pretty enthusiastic about, and we'll be coming back to that in our conversation. But this notion that we are for open borders is, again, a red wavy myth coming from the right. So I want to just take a step back and just let's look at this for a minute, right? So how we do in America, right? Lowest peacetime unemployment rate since World War II. The stock market's up 16-fold since 1989. Lowest poverty uninsured rates ever. Best economic recovery in the G7. Biden has made these historic investments that are going to keep us prosperous for generations to come. We have all these job openings, wages are up, new business formation, right? Real earnings up in 2022. The trade deficit, budget deficit are way down. Crime rates are way below what they were. Immigrant crime rates are way below native born in every measure. Teenage pregnancy rates are way down. College graduation rates are at an all-time high. By so many measures, right? We are doing so much better as a country than we ever have. And we have to figure out how to be able to recognize the progress that we've made as a country while still talking about all the things that are still left undone. And what's important is that the central narrative from Trump, and you can find video of him saying this, that everything, this decline, the carnage that he describes is because of immigration, that letting all these people into the country destroyed the America that we knew. And yet what I just showed you is that by so many measures, things are better today than they've ever been while we've had this period of mass migration into the United States. And so Trump's fundamental story that he tells, that migration has made everything worse, is actually false and wrong. It's the exact opposite. Things may be better today than they've ever been because of migration, not in spite of it. And we as Democrats need to lean into this argument very, very heavily. The public is with us. People see immigrants as having made a net positive contribution during the Trump era. People had to really think about this in ways they hadn't before, and they came out on the right side of this. We also know that on globalization, the broader issues around globalization, the Republicans have become much more protectionist. Democrats, who have far more people who are first or second generation immigrants who are still connected to the outside world, and many young people who've grown up with an expectation of globalization, are much more positive about the opportunities of globalization than Republicans are. So our coalition in polling still remains remarkably pro-trade, pro-globalization, and pro-immigration, right? Outward-leaning, open in their hearts, and very traditionally liberal in this regard. And so by so many measures today, right, things are better. We may be living in the strongest American economy in our history, and particularly when you consider that it's allowed opportunities for women and people of color that are unprecedented. This month, we just had the lowest Black unemployment rate ever recorded in American history at 4.7%, a remarkable achievement. So our success as a party has not just been in governing during this period, it's been in politics too. This is the popular vote in the election since 1992. I worked for Bill Clinton, and we had lost 5 out of 6 the previous presidential elections, some of them by huge margins. And what we set out to do as Clintonites and New Democrats was to build a party that could compete in national elections again after being uncompetitive. And look at our track record since 1992. We've won more votes in 7 out of 8 presidential elections. No other American political party has done that before. This is the best run of the American political party in American history based on the popular vote numbers. And you can see that the Republicans during this entire period of globalization have only broken 50% one time and only broken 48% one time. And so if there is a party, if this is a center-right or center-left nation, this sure looks like we're a center-left nation. We also know that this last election was a remarkably good one for us. It was the 3rd consecutive strong election in a row for us. We gained ground in 7 critical battlegrounds. We picked up a Senate seat, 4 House seats, 3 governorships. We kept the House very close, which is important for 2024. We did better in the early vote in 2018 and 2020, and our candidates dramatically outraised Republicans. Our grassroots today is stronger and more muscular than it's ever been. And the last 2 elections in the Southwest have been the best for us in the last 80 years. I'm missing, there's a slide I'm missing. Okay, what I was going to say is that part of the reason, as you know from my work, that I talk about getting to 55 is that from 1992 to 2004, we averaged 47% of the vote in those 4 presidential elections. We then identified this new coalition that emerged of Hispanics and millennials who were starting to come into our electorate in large numbers. We leaned into this new coalition and we grew our vote. We expanded our coalition. And in the 4 elections since 2006, we've averaged 51% of the vote. We jumped 4 points. My goal this cycle, we can talk more in the Q&A, is I want to try to get to 55 by leaning into yet what I think is now a new emergent coalition that's coming about through the Republicans' radicalization. As you can see, party ID during this period is the country's been much more Democratic than Republican during this whole period. And that if this is all true, by the way, if what I'm saying is true, that basically if you became politically aware after 1989, and you've experienced a country that's been well governed when we've been in power, and not so well governed or terribly governed when they've been in power, then there should be an awareness of that in people who are in, let's say, their mid to late 40s and younger, who came of age in that newer America, not the older America, Reagan's America, but this new America, and that's exactly what you see. We started seeing about 20 years ago, right, in the 2006 election, we started seeing a big change. The under 45 vote had been a contested vote. It had been up for grabs. But structurally, because of the things I was talking about, the younger people started becoming, and the Iraq War had a lot to do with this, younger people started becoming much more democratic. This is a relatively new development, and it's very significant. And you'll see that in the two elections, we did not do very well during this period, 2010 and 2014. Our performance of young people really um, uh, tailed off. And so it's my belief that the way that we have to go pursue this election is by driving, getting younger people to vote in much higher numbers. It shouldn't be that the part of the electorate that is votes for us the most is the most Democratic, votes the least. We've got to change that. And I just want people to see that this is based on their lived experience. People who are younger have lived in a country where Democrats are good and Republicans are not so good. And that's why they are where they are. And, oh, there it is. There's that slide, sorry. And this goes through about my get to 55 idea, which is that we need to now, we got from 47 to 51. Now we need to get to 55. And we can talk more about that in the Q&A. There's also lots of material on the get to 55 concept on my site if you at Hopium. And as you can see, that what makes up the composition of young and older people is changing. And this is very important for us because every 2 to 4 years, as all these new people come into the electorate who are 15 points more Democratic, our margins can grow. And if we can just get if we do one thing in 2000, and the Washington Post had a great story about this last week, if we can get under 45-year-old voters to vote in just the same number as their population distribution, holding everything else constant, Joe Biden goes from 51% to 55%, and we win by 10 points. So the opportunities here, if we can increase youth participation in our politics, is extraordinary. And so despite all of this, though, we're still underperforming on the economy. This is relevant, very relevant to the meeting that's going to happen in the White House today. This is the 2020 election, the best exit poll from the election. Among voters who chose the economy as their number one issue, Trump won those voters by 4-1. It's kind of a stunning number, given that he had overseen an extraordinary recession. And better able to handle the economy, right? Trump won those voters by 12 points. In poll after poll that we saw during 2021 and 2022, Biden's struggle with the economy was evident in all this polling. I mean, here you can see him being up 27 on, this is June of 2021. Here he is plus 27 on COVID, plus 20 in healthcare, just plus 4 on the economy, right? So underperformance here relative to some other core issues. And that underperformance, I'm going to skip through this because it just goes through and shows it in different ways. That underperformance has continued to show up. And in the Washington Post poll, which I don't have up here, that came out this weekend, Trump was ahead of Biden by 18 points in the economy. And it's just my general view that we can't get to where we want to get to in 2024 unless we get into positive territory on the economy, that we win the big economic argument with the Republicans. And given all this data that I showed you, 96% of all jobs, everything else, it's crazy that we're losing the economic argument with Republicans. This is an urgent national priority for Democrats to come to understand all of this data that I've assembled and to go out and prosecute this argument, to get loud and prosecute this argument in the coming year. We have to get into positive territory by early 2024, I think, to have the kind of election that we all want to have next year. So let me sum up with let me make sense of everything we just saw and just offer some thoughts about the future, right? So first of all, I have this burning belief that one of the big things we have to do as Democrats is reject any attempt at what's called symmetry, where there's a left and a right, they're kind of equally at fault and equally full of virtue, equally full of vice. I mean, nothing could be further from the truth. What you saw in this presentation today is there's been one modern successful party that's repeatedly made things better, and another party that's repeatedly brought recession, higher deficits, and made things worse for people. We have to do more to sort of push asymmetry rather than symmetry, the sense that the two parties are not the same. We're very different. We are better than they are, right? I mean, just pure and simple, we've done a much better job. Any way you cut this since 1989, we've been good, they haven't been good. It's really important that we just try to live in that space in our heads and not allow this kind of red wavy left-right thing, which obscures the good that we've done and obscures the bad that they've done. It's a Republican construct, the left-right. We have to reject it. The second is that I think we're in this period now where we're coming out of this collective trauma as a world, very much like at the end of World War II, and that we're being called again as Democrats to make sure that freedom and democracy prevail. Our party is the one that made sure that we won World War II, and it was the big one, right? And made sure that freedom and democracy prevail and authoritarians didn't rule the day. We are, I think, being called again under very different circumstances, but equally perhaps important. And I go back in this presentation to this speech given in January of 1941, the Four Freedoms speech, where FDR laid out an incredibly simple and powerful vision for how he wanted the world to evolve after World War II. When we started building the world back together and putting the pieces back together, he laid out this very simple concept, all based on freedom. This connection that freedom, the word freedom, right, which has now become so central. It was the core word of Joe Biden's rollout video 2 weeks ago. This word freedom is the foundational word of the modern Democratic Party. The world, the United Nations, the entire global system that we live in today is based on these four freedoms. These four freedoms are in the United Nations Charter as the foundational way to understand the world that we were building together. These four freedoms are the foundational understanding of who we are as modern Democrats. And it's really important to get connected to them. They're so powerful. I think about these all the time in my own work. What a remarkable formulation. And what a history tells us also is that everyone thinks that FDR wrote these phrases himself, just in the drafting of this speech that became arguably the most important political speech ever given in American English. And since then, the world that we have built, that the Democratic Party built, in which FDR initiated and then Clinton extended in his presidency, and we extended, and Obama did as well, extended to the rest of the world, has become a golden age in human history. You've seen life expectancy explode. More people have lived under democracies in recent years than any time in human history. We've seen extreme poverty be, significantly reduced, and the people of the world have more opportunities today to do than they've ever had in all of human history. And this world, this golden age, as I describe it, is something that we did, right? We imagined this world. We fought for this world. We built this world, which is why preserving it under the assault that's coming from China and Russia right now is particularly important for Democrats. And you can see that we are much more engaged as a party in defending Ukraine than the Republicans are, who seem very comfortable with Vladimir Putin in a way that I'm sure makes Ronald Reagan turn over his grave every day. And so it's important as we go forward, I think, as a party, is to lean into our extraordinary legacy, right? Think about these things that we've done over the last 100 years. Pretty remarkable, not just a strong period from 1989 on, but look at all this, right? This is remarkable work that we've done together. I'm so proud of this. I'm so proud of my party. I'm so proud to have been part of this political project, which, because of the work in the world that we built, may have done more good for more people than any other political project in all of history. This is really important. And on the other side, I used to not have this slide. And I used to just say that Republicans haven't done their part, but we know that that's no longer accurate, right? We know that the Republicans have descended into something malevolent, something very illiberal, something very un-American, very anti-democratic in their politics. And it's critical that we not allow their extremism to be sugarcoated or to be minimized. And I think that's part of what happened in the red wave, why so many people got the red wave wrong in 2022. The journalists in Washington may have discounted their extremism in their day-to-day coverage, but the American people didn't. And this is why this is still a big problem for them going forward. And so I just want to remind everybody, as we try to figure out, if you believe that things have gone wrong, and I think a lot more has gone right than gone wrong in America in the last 30 years, but if you believe things have gone wrong, what is your assessment of why and what's gone wrong? Well, if you look at this, right, it's not, there should be 47 out of 49 million jobs. The slide is right, I didn't change the thing at the top, but if you believe this is true, then Washington isn't broken, our politics isn't broken. It's what used to be called the Republican Party is. And we need to be accurate about this because we have an obligation to tell the truth to our fellow citizens. And it isn't neoliberalism or Washington or politics that's caused all this. It's the Republicans that have caused all this. And if you need any reminders, let's just spend a few seconds, right? in a place where we are reminded about what they've become. Thanks, everybody. Join me in being loud and proud about the good the Democrats have done. We are part of one of the most noble and consequential political projects in all of human history. We've been called to defend freedom and democracy. We're being called again. We need to be loud and to pump positive sentiment into our discourse as a way of responding to the negative sentiment machine that the Republicans have become. And please, if you want to keep this conversation going and live in this space that we're living in today, come join me on Substack. And a recording of this presentation will be available this afternoon, both on YouTube and on my Substack. So let me stop sharing and turn it open. Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's Simon. Okay, here's what we're going to do with Q&A, because I went on a little bit long today. There's a lot here. I'm going to start with the questions in the box, and then I'll move on to hands raised if you just give me a second. Lauren asked the question that I always get asked, which is how do we get louder as a party? Well, I have there's a lot on my Hopium site. I talk about this a lot, and I'm not going to do the whole wrap because it's all there, and I want to talk about the material today. But part of it is that the fundamental thing I think we have to think about is that all of us have to view ourselves as information warriors for democracy. Tucker Carlson reached 3 million people every night and had the kind of influence that he had. Imagine if 1 million of us every day promoted this kind of material through our networks. We could easily reach 10 or 15 million people a day. I'm reaching tens of thousands of people every day, right? If you can reach 10 people and 1 million people do it, our voices will be collectively very loud together. I think there's a lot of things, I think we've gotten very effective at being loud in campaigns. And our campaigns have become muscular and large because of the activated grassroots in America today. But we need to get loud every day, 24/7, 365. Their politics is not just during campaigns, it's every day. And we need to turn on every day the way that they do. I think we all should be thinking about what can we do. One of the reasons I do this presentation is to give you more ammunition to make these arguments to your community. It's why I've set up Hopium, right? Is to create more material for you to go be a successful information warrior for your democracy. And so, but the second thing is there are a lot of good new organizations joining groups like Pods of America and Daily Kos that are springing up to promote our values that are owned by us, right? And one of the things they did is they own their own media, and we have to own some of our own media. And so groups like Courier Newsroom, Resolute Square, Deep State Radio, Midas Touch are all doing remarkable things. And I also think there's a lot of innovation happening at Substack. It's one of the reasons that I went to Substack as a new platform. I feel like when you're in the media, you can say anything. When you're at a 501c3 and C4, as I was, your speech is very limited. And we have, I think, too many dollars in our family are tied up in C3s and C4s, which have enormous limitations on their speech, and we have to learn from them. On the issue of the deficit, let me just go through this very quickly. Is that because there's a bunch of questions here? Kevin McCarthy has a single goal. It's not to reduce the deficit. He wants to push the economy into recession. Again, as Republicans are pretty good at that. It's one of their most successful things they've done over the last 40 years. Or he wants to push us into default. Either one of these things would be devastating for the American economy and for Joe Biden personally. And so this is really a search and destroy mission against the incumbent president, his party. It has nothing to do with reducing the deficit, because as I showed you, the Republicans actually have never in recent times reduced the deficit. It's always gone up and went up under Reagan too. And so their track record is the deficit increases. If they were so concerned about the deficit, why did it always go up when they were president? Why did it always go down when we were in power? This isn't about the deficit and debt. This is about making draconian cuts that will push the economy into a deep recession, to cripple the Biden presidency, or to push us into an unprecedented default, which will also potentially cripple the Biden presidency. So we need to not allow this fiction and this performative stuff that's going on about how the Republicans are really the party of fiscal responsibility when it's been exactly the exact opposite. this is very red wavy, right? In the sense that there's this false understanding in our daily discourse that we need to push back on. I have been producing an enormous amount of material on this in the last few months, including this presentation. Please come to Hopium. We're living in this conversation every day. So what does Biden do? I think Biden's going to stick to his guns. We can't give in to this. This is not a serious thing that McCarthy's doing. And if he wants to, he's going to tank the economy, then let him tank the economy. And I don't think we can give in to this kind of legislative terrorism. It's not what a president should be doing. And we have to, though, I think we have to do a better job at defining the terms of the debate, which is part of the reason that we're here today. Yeah, I mean, Barbara and many of you. So let me just say, this presentation is available as is. The slides are not. And someday I'm going to start releasing the individual slides in some kind of formative deck. I mean, if you can imagine, the work here that you're looking at is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars over a long period of time, and that went into this. I do release probably 8 or 9 of the individual graphs that come out in our material, which you can use from my site. But if you want people to connect with this argument, then send them to Hopium, subscribe to Hopium. It's the best way. It's free. I'm not asking for money for people to be part of the community, but I'm very aware that now that I'm reaching more people, I need to make this more accessible. We're going to be spending time on that this summer. But even if you just go to the things I've written in the last week, you can find links to most of the major charts and graphs you saw in this that you can cut and paste into your own work, giving Hopium and me credit, the appropriate credit, because this is valuable intellectual property that I'm extending to the world, right? And I hope you'll understand that there are issues here of, what I'm proud of, and I want to say that to those of you who are newer to us, some of the slides that you've seen today, I've actually ended up in the White House. I mean, the slide that the president often uses when he gives a press conference on the economy is the jobs created per month. That came right out of this deck and out of my writing, right? I mean, I work very closely with the White House in this. We've all got to learn this material, do a better job. This is a party-wide project. It's not, what is the DNC going to do and what's Biden going to do? What are you going to do, right? We all have to take responsibility for improving the discourse. And yes, I want the Democratic Party to do more. That's why I'm releasing all this stuff publicly, is to put pressure on everybody to embrace the kind of argument that you're hearing today. The lots of questions basically here that are very similar so Nan asked a question about each country, the immigrants. What I was showing you that, Nan, was that there's just been a massive amount of immigrants into the country over a long period of time. And most of them legal. There have been some undocumented immigrants, but we've gone through a period since 1965 when we changed our immigration laws, where we no longer favored Europeans, but we opened it up to the people of the world. And it's the central reason our demography has changed so much. In 1989, prior to 1965, the country was basically 89, 90% white and 10% black and 1% other. I mean, there are only 3 million Hispanics in the United States in 1965. There are 65 million, I think, today. I mean, it's 58 million today. Our population has changed so much. We've changed so much as a country. I mean, we were 11% people of color. We're now about 35% people of color. The white population is now down to about 65% of the overall population in the US. So part of what I was showing with that, and you're right, it's very quick, is that the immigration that's happened has come in from all over the world. And we've gone through a very profound demographic change as a country. It's been very rapid and profound. And I think what happens when you go through that kind of profound demographic change, when you hear older Republicans say, hey, this country isn't the same country that I grew up in, they're right, by the way, about that. And I think we're actually better than we were. I mean, that's part of the argument I make with this presentation, is that I think that all this migration we've had has actually made us better, stronger, more entrepreneurial, more capable, stronger, more diverse. But there's a lot of resistance to that change. And it shouldn't be, I don't think anyone should expect it. I mean, to be surprised by it. I think that what we have to recognize is that really since the late 1960s, the central domestic offering of the Republican Party has been exploitation of racial fear. And it is something that manifests, whether it's through burning cities or Willie Horton, go back, or the Mexican rapists, whatever the lines are that have been used to evoke racial fear. It's been the central domestic offering, which is one of the reasons why the Republicans have been so bad at economics, because they don't actually have, this is not an economically literate party. Their domestic offering is tax and spend, which is about making sure that we let white people pay less and give less to those undeserving people, those other people. That's not an economic strategy, that's a social policy strategy. And so one of the reasons that they are continually a failure is they don't even understand that what they're promoting and what McCarthy's promoting is essentially is social policy and not economic policy. If he cuts the deficit as much as he cuts spending as much as he wants to, the American economy is going to go into a tailspin that could take the entire global economy down. Are they even aware of that? I mean, is there any economics behind anything they're doing? There isn't. It's just they just want those undeserving people to have less. That's all they really care about. That's their whole politics. And you're seeing it play out right now in the White House today. Let me just go through a few more questions. Lots of so many comments and questions. Let me just say that, look, so many of the questions is why don't people know more about this? I think we have to recognize that this has been a failure of the Democratic Party to tell this story. I don't think I don't think we should sugarcoat it. I think that we have not done what we need to do here. I think Biden had very adversarial circumstances when he came into the presidency. He had COVID and he had an insurrection that had just taken place. I mean, it was a remarkably difficult time for him to come into the presidency. And I think there's a lot of residual shutdown Democrat stuff. The Democrats, cranked the economy down too much. DeSantis's entire campaign. Those things are fading now. And I think that the politics of COVID are fading into history, and we have a new politics now. And I think those of you who hear me talk in Hopium, I think we have two big jobs we have to do this year as Democrats. One is that we need to think about getting to 55, launch a national voter registration drive for young people, significantly increase youth turnout. We have an enormous youth opportunity. Shame on us if we don't take advantage of it and really do something where we fundamentally change the composition of the American electorate as we head into 2024. The second thing we need to do is we need to win the economic argument. I think we're going to have the opportunity as COVID fades, Biden's going to have the opportunity to reintroduce his economic strategy to the American people outside of a COVID lens, outside of a shutdown Democratic lens. And man, do we have a lot to sell, as I just showed you. And his current ad that he is running in the battleground states is an ad that addresses directly some of these economic issues. But we can be doing it too in all of our networks and all of our communities. Share this video everywhere you can. Bring it to folks' attention. Help me get this message out. Yes, it's a half an hour, but people can take in half an hour to sort of understand a more accurate and modern version of American history than the one that we're hearing every day in the national discourse. That's part of what I'm really trying to do with this presentation, which is to liberate us from sort of a false ongoing red wavy narrative about what's happened in America since 1989. This idea of two parties being equally full of virtue and equally full of vice. It's absurd. It's an absurd distortion of what's taking place. And this sort of need for the media and for 501c3s to sort of keep this patina up of this kind of civil discourse between two opposing sides, it's become corrosive and destructive, and it's something we have to fight against. It's one of the main reasons that I've launched this new Hopium site, is that I'm trying to find more ways to attack and this fundamental false ongoing red wavy narrative that exists over our politics every day. There's an urgency to this. I mean, it's already taking place. Kevin McCarthy is walking into the White House today, literally about to pull the pin in an unprecedented way. No one's ever done this before in American history. He's purposely trying to push the country either into recession or default. There's not a third option here in his mind. And the idea that he's actually trying to do enormous harm to the country now in the way that the Republicans did on January 6th is completely absent from the daily discourse. You should view this as an extension of what happened on January 6th, what McCarthy's doing now. It's an unprincipled attack on the country in order to take down his political opponent. And it shows just how much the Republicans have expanded what's possible. And these are now things that are illiberal and wild and extreme because they have been overtaken by extremists and extremism. Marjorie Taylor Greene is far more of the sort of the center of the party than John McCain was, for example. And we have an obligation. That's why, to me, it's so important that we get to 55. We have to make this election in 2024 about a repudiation of this politics. This has to be seen unequivocally, this next election, as a repudiation of them and what's happened to them and the danger they're bringing to the country. The more dead kids, 10-year-olds giving birth, an covering up for an insurrectionist and a serial criminal, and now about to potentially blow up the American economy. These are things that there should be an enormous political price for. And we have to make sure through our good work and our hard work every day that there is a political price to be paid here. Let me go, everybody. Thank you so much. I just want to end by saying that this journey that I've been on with all of you at Hopium has been really rewarding and exciting. I've met an incredible number of people in the last year since I began this sort of challenging of the red wave. It's been so inspiring to be with all of you. I get so much out of these engagements with all of you. And I speak to groups of several hundred people. And what I see is people motivated by love of country, by patriotism and optimism, an unwillingness to let their country slide into something that they wouldn't recognize. And I just want to end by saying thanks to all of you. I mean, we had these strong elections because of all of you. We were able to defy history in 2022 because of all of you. We are heading into 2024, I think, in much better shape than the Republicans because of all of you. And we have to keep going, right? We have one more election where we've got to put our pedal to the metal and really try to grow our coalition, expand it to make sure that we can, wound MAGA in a way that will potentially start to loosen this dark grip over the Republican Party. Loosening MAGA's dark grip on the Republican Party will be good for the country. It'll be good for us. It'll be good for the Republicans too. And I want to just congratulate Liz Cheney today for spending her own money, putting an ad on the air in New Hampshire, attacking Trump, reminding voters there that he led an insurrection against the United States. This stuff can't be put into the Orwellian memory hole. We need to be reminding voters about who they are and what they become. It's really critical. But our most important job is to tell the story that we told today, which is that with Democrats, things get better. When you put us in charge, we continually improve the lives of Americans. You put them in charge. That's not what happens. This fundamental contrast between our good works and their repeated failure to do their part is something that we must do everything we can to put into discourse here in the United States between now and the spring of next year. We can do it. We've done powerful and important things together before, everybody, right? Now we've got to do this. I think these are doable things. I look forward to doing it with all of you. Thanks all. Take care.